Hello and welcome to Digitech. Today we're doing a different kind of project where we're going to learn about an input that is uniquely suited for if statements, which is radio buttons. Radio buttons are the little kind of dot looking, almost like a bullet point sort of input, where you can select one out of several options. And usually they're mutually exclusive, which means you can only choose one out of the two. And if you click on a different one, it'll unclick the other one. So this is really useful for options where you can only have one out of the group, like let's say ice cream flavors or something like that, where if you're being a strict kind of ice cream vendor, you don't want anybody mixing. They can only have one flavor. So if they choose vanilla, they're not allowed to have strawberry or chocolate. But if they choose strawberry, it'll untick vanilla. And this works really well with if statements because if statements are kind of similar in that only one block of code will run and the other blocks won't. So if one of the if conditions is true, the others will not get run at all. And so you can see it links up with radio buttons really nicely. Our project today is going to be kind of an abstract version of this. It's basically going to have option 1 and option 2, and it'll just tell you which one you clicked. So you have two radio buttons, a normal button, so two radio inputs, and a button. And when you click on the button, it'll tell you which one of the two options you clicked. So here we go, as usual, connecting to jQuery and deleting some of the extra code that if you were publishing this to the world, then you'd probably include that. But for us, we don't need it because we're just practicing. Good old console log in there. You'd notice I deleted the double quotes there and changed them back to single quotes. If you're coding according to the JavaScript standard, which means it's kind of like guidelines for how everyone can write JavaScript the same kind of way so that you can read anyone else's JavaScript quite easily, you should be using single quotes as much as possible and double quotes only when you need to. So usually you only need to use double quotes when your sentence inside it has a single quote. So if you've got like don't or isn't, those words have a single quote, and so you need to use double quotes for those, but most of the time you don't. So now we're starting to write some of our actual program, and the first thing is a label and an input. As usual, good combination. The first one is just option 1, and our input is type radio. So this is going to tell the browser that it's a radio button, and the name is options. The name here indicates the group of radio buttons that should be mutually exclusive. So all the radio buttons that have the same name, you'll only be able to click one of those. The only difference between the two buttons is the 1 versus 2. Everything else is the same. So now I should only be able to click one of these, and it seems to be working. So because they have the same name, the browser only lets one of them be ticked. And you can see the ID says rad option 2 to indicate that this input, when we're coding it, is a radio button. Just helps save us going back and forward from the HTML back to the JavaScript. And underneath we're going to have a button, and this is what's going to kick off our code. I was going to make a big long button here. I guess I did. And ID btn check again, so that in the code the btn suggests to us that it's the button. And finally we just have a paragraph where we can output which button the user has selected. In larger applications of this, you might not output what the user has selected. You might just use it somewhere in your code to make a decision and do something different. But here, we're just going to output exactly what's happening. Now, I wasn't quite sure what I'd named that button, so I decided just to copy and paste it directly from the HTML. That way I know that there's no typos or anything. It's definitely the right thing. And you can do this with all of the different IDs. If you're prone to typos, or if you're just a little bit lazy like I am, then you can just copy and paste it directly across. And you know for sure that there's definitely no problems there. The only thing is to remember that hashtag always. So we're going to set up an empty result variable. And on a new line, start our if statement. Now I like to put empty lines in between sort of different blocks of code that are doing different things, it helps me just see a separation where I can kind of have a pause and think about it. A little bit like a full stop at the end of a sentence or something, or a gap between paragraphs. So if statement's looking pretty complicated here, but let's break it down. The first part, dollars, brackets, quotes, hashtag rad option, that looks kind of familiar. That's connecting us to our radio button. Next one, dot prop. So that's short for property. And then in quotes we have checked, which is like having that bullet point in there. So basically this if statement is saying if rad option 1 is checked, then the result is updated to say you chose option 1. And because that code is a little bit complicated, or it's a little bit tedious to write out, I'm just going to copy and paste it and change the 1 to a 2. And I'm sure you can guess that this line of code is going to say you chose option 2. So we have three statements here, and I'm going to cover my bases by putting in one that says you didn't choose an option. And you can see the text here has gone white. That's because JavaScript has kind of stopped the sentence because it saw a single quote. And because our sentence has a single quote in it, we need to put double quotes around it. And I was a little bit fussy here and put full stops at the end of all the sentences as well. Our last line of code is just to put that result onto the page and give the user a bit of an update about what actually happened. Now again, one of those 3 lines is going to run depending on what the situation is. If option 1 is checked, that first line is going to run. If option 2 is checked, the middle line. Otherwise, the last line. Now you would have seen me just fix up a piece of code there because I forgot to put in else if in the middle, and that would have broken it. But here we go. Quick refresh to test the didn't choose an option. Option 2 seems to work, and option 1 seems to work. And we notice I can't choose both options. So this piece of code can be really useful if you want the user to choose between a bunch of things and they can only choose one. Now we need to add in comments to describe our code. And again, you could add in a comment line for every single line of the if statement, but the comment should describe the code. If we want the nitty-gritty detail, we can read the code line by line. If we want a brief overview, just to get the gist of it, then we should be able to read the comments and get a feel for what the code is doing without having to read the whole lot. So here we're just going to describe the whole if block about what it actually does with one comment. And the output is there as well. So that covers this project, a different kind of input, a radio button this time, as well as practicing the if statements by telling the user which option they picked out of 2.